The soundstage was quiet except for the soft hum of the lights. Sandra stood by the camera, holding her script close, pretending to read. But her eyes kept drifting toward Keanu, who was seated on the edge of the set stairs, lost in thought. Everyone knew this scene mattered. It was simple on paper, but emotionally heavy. The director called for silence. Keanu looked up, his eyes calm but deep, like they carried 1,000 unspoken stories. When their eyes met, something shifted in the air. The crew fell silent as if time itself paused. Sandra forgot her lines for a second. Keanu gave a small, reassuring nod, and somehow that moment felt real, not scripted. It wasn't the first film they had done together, but something about this project felt different. Maybe it was the timing, maybe it was who they had become over the years. Sandra admired how humble he still was, even after decades of fame. He helped the crew move props, carried his own coffee cup, and thanked everyone after every take. When the director shouted, "Cut!" a quiet laugh escaped Sandra. The crew noticed her smile, and soon a wave of soft laughter spread across the set. Keanu grinned, too, a rare, unguarded moment that made everyone's day lighter. Later, during lunch, Sandra sat beside him under a half-built set wall. She asked, "How do you stay so calm all the time?" Keanu smiled, took a slow breath, and said, "Because I've learned that peace is stronger than pressure." His words stayed with her. She didn't reply, just watched how gently he treated everyone around him, even the youngest intern. That quiet respect became the rhythm of the whole crew. People started helping each other more, smiling more, working with a strange kind of joy. No one could have guessed that one small glance between them would begin something unexpected, something that would soon change the entire energy on set. The next morning, the set felt different. There was a quiet excitement, but also a strange tension that no one could explain. Sandra arrived early, sipping her coffee, watching the crew prepare the scene. Keanu was already there, helping a lighting assistant fix a broken stand. He wore the same calm smile, the one that somehow made everyone else breathe easier. The director gathered them together for a briefing. Today's scene was emotional, a moment of separation between their characters. Sandra had read the script 100 times, but something about it felt too real now. Maybe because of that eye contact yesterday. Or maybe because Keanu had unknowingly made her feel something she hadn't felt in years. Peace mixed with admiration. When the cameras rolled, Keanu's voice carried a softness that didn't feel like acting. His eyes spoke more than his words. Sandra felt her own eyes well up, but she stayed in character. Their emotions collided on screen in a way that left even the director speechless. When the scene ended, no one clapped. Everyone just stood there, silent, trying to process what they had witnessed. After the take, Sandra walked out to the back lot, needing air. Keanu followed a few minutes later. He didn't speak, just stood beside her, watching the sunlight hit the nearby soundstage walls. Finally, Sandra said quietly, "That felt real, didn't it?" Keanu nodded. "Real emotions make the best stories," he replied softly. "But sometimes they come from pain." She turned to him, curious, sensing the weight in his tone. "Pain?" she asked gently. Keanu hesitated, his eyes lowering for a moment. "Everyone carries something they don't talk about," he said. "It's not the pain that defines you, but what you do with it." His words lingered like a quiet echo. Sandra realized she barely knew the real Keanu. The world saw a calm man, a kind star. But she sensed layers beneath that calm. Loss, love, silence, and a quiet strength that came from surviving all of it. The next few days, the bond between them grew in unspoken ways. They didn't talk much, but every shared look carried meaning. The crew began to notice too. Whispers spread that something special was happening. Not romantic, but something deeper, something made of respect and understanding. One evening, while the crew was packing up, a young camera operator accidentally dropped a heavy lens. Everyone froze, expecting anger or frustration, but Keanu rushed to help, kneeling down, checking if the boy was hurt before picking up the broken lens. He smiled and said, "It's just a thing, don't worry. People matter more than equipment." The boy nodded, almost in tears. Sandra watched the moment quietly, her heart swelling with respect. She realized kindness wasn't a show for him. It was his natural way of being, But what she didn't know was that behind his calm, Keanu was hiding something. A quiet storm he hadn't shared with anyone on set. And soon, that secret would find its way into the light. The following week began with a heavy silence on set. The director had planned an intense night sequence, one that demanded every ounce of emotion from both Keanu and Sandra. The sky outside was dark, rain machines were set, and the scene required them to say goodbye under falling rain. Sandra arrived early, finding Keanu sitting alone by the corner of the set, holding a small photo in his hand. He quickly slipped it into his jacket pocket when he saw her. She didn't ask, but the sadness in his eyes stayed with her all day. When the cameras rolled, the rain began to pour. Sandra's voice trembled as she delivered her lines, but what caught everyone off guard was Keanu's performance. It wasn't acting anymore. The pain in his eyes felt real, raw, like he was reliving something personal. The crew fell silent again, lost in the depth of the moment. When the director shouted, "Cut!" Keanu turned away quickly, wiping his face before anyone noticed. But Sandra saw. She saw the truth behind the performance. After everyone left, she walked up to him quietly. "That wasn't just acting, was it?" she asked softly. Keanu gave a faint smile. "Sometimes the lines between acting and life disappear," he said. "And maybe that's what makes it real." She hesitated, then said, "You can talk to me if you ever want to." For a long moment, he said nothing. Then he took out the small photo from his pocket. It was an old picture, a smiling woman beside a vintage motorcycle. "She was my best friend," he said quietly. "We used to talk about everything. She passed away years ago. Every film I do, I try to honor her spirit in some way." Sandra listened in silence, her heart tightening. There was no dramatic pause, no cinematic music, just a quiet moment between two souls who understood loss. "That explains the sadness in your eyes," she said gently. Keanu nodded. "Grief never leaves," he said. "It just teaches you how to be kind." That night, as the crew packed up, Sandra found herself thinking about his words. She realized how his calmness, his patience, his compassion all came from the pain he had turned into empathy. The next morning, something strange happened. A rumor spread across the studio. One of the producers had complained that Keanu refused a luxury trailer, choosing instead to stay with the crew in the shared area. They said it made others look bad. When Sandra heard that, she felt angry. During the lunch break, she stood beside Keanu and said, "You didn't tell them why you did it." He smiled calmly. "I didn't need to," he said. "If kindness needs explanation, it's no longer kindness." His words struck her deeper than she expected. She realized the world always tried to complicate goodness, but Keanu kept it simple. Help, listen, respect. But later that evening, as the shoot ended, a sudden call came from the studio head. Something had gone wrong, a serious misunderstanding that could put Keanu's reputation at risk. Sandra overheard bits of the conversation, and what she heard made her heart race. Someone had accused Keanu of delaying production and refusing key scenes for selfish reasons. The calm, kind man she had come to admire was about to face something that could destroy his image forever. The next morning, the studio was filled with whispers. People avoided eye contact, pretending to be busy, but everyone had heard the news. The report had spread fast. Someone had leaked that Keanu was being difficult on set, delaying production, and refusing certain emotional scenes. Sandra couldn't believe it. She had seen how patient and professional he was, how he stayed longer than anyone to help crew members finish their work. She knew something wasn't right. When she reached the set, she saw Keanu sitting quietly in the corner, reading his script like nothing had happened. His calmness was unnerving. A few crew members whispered nearby, but he didn't seem to notice. Sandra walked up to him. "You know what they're saying, right?" she asked. Keanu looked up and smiled softly. "Yes," he said. "But the truth always finds its way out. You should defend yourself," she said firmly. "You don't deserve this." He paused, then shook his head. "I've learned that sometimes silence speaks louder than defense. Reacting gives noise power." His words were calm, but Sandra could feel the weight behind them. She wanted to argue, to tell him that silence wasn't enough, but something about his peace stopped her. A few hours later, the director arrived. His tone was cold, distant. "Keanu," he said, "the studio wants you to reshoot the emotional sequence. They say your expression lacked depth." Sandra froze. She had seen that scene. It was raw and perfect, but Keanu nodded without hesitation. "All right," he said simply. "Let's do it again." They set up the same scene, the rainy goodbye. The lights dimmed, water poured again, and the cameras rolled. This time, Keanu stood silent for a long moment before speaking his lines. His face held quiet heartbreak. Every word came from somewhere real. When it ended, no one moved. The director's eyes softened. The crew looked ashamed, and even the producer who had doubted him stayed silent. Sandra's eyes filled with tears. She realized he had turned their doubt into art. After the take, Keanu approached the crew member who had started the rumor, a young assistant who had misunderstood his calmness as arrogance. Instead of anger, Keanu placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. "We all make mistakes," he said. "What matters is learning from them." The young man looked down, guilt covering his face. "I'm sorry, sir," he whispered. Keanu smiled. "Don't call me sir," he said. "Just Keanu." The air in the room changed after that. Even those who had doubted him began to see him differently, not as a superstar, but as a quiet leader who led with compassion, not ego. But as peace returned to the set, another unexpected challenge was waiting outside. When they left for a press event that evening, a reporter confronted Keanu with harsh questions, twisting the story even further. Cameras flashed, microphones pushed forward, and the calm smile that usually stayed on his face began to fade. Sandra stepped between them, her voice steady. "Enough," she said. "You have no idea what really happened," the reporter insisted. "Then tell us, Miss Bullock, what's he hiding?" She looked straight into the camera. "He's hiding nothing," she said firmly. "He's just being human in a world that forgot how to be kind." The crowd went silent. Cameras kept rolling, but no one spoke. Keanu looked at her with quiet gratitude. That one sentence changed everything. The internet would later call it the moment that silenced Hollywood. But back on set, after the event, Keanu found Sandra alone near the soundstage and said softly, "Thank you for standing up when I stayed silent." She smiled. "You've stood up for everyone else since day one. It was my turn." Their friendship had deepened beyond words. But neither of them knew. The biggest test of their strength and kindness was still ahead. The next few days moved quietly, as if the storm had finally passed. The rumors faded, the media calmed down, and filming continued. But underneath the surface, something deeper was brewing, something that would test everything they had built. One morning, during an outdoor shoot in the mountains, the crew prepared for one of the film's most dangerous sequences. It was a stunt scene involving a narrow road and an old car. Keanu had insisted on doing it himself, even though the stunt team had offered a double. Sandra tried to convince him otherwise. "You don't have to prove anything," she said softly. He smiled. "I'm not proving anything. I just want the story to feel honest." As the cameras set up, dark clouds began forming over the ridge. The director looked uneasy, but decided to go ahead before the light changed. Sandra watched nervously from behind the monitor as Keanu got into the car, his face calm as ever. The first take went smoothly, but during the second, the brakes failed midway down the slope. The car spun slightly and hit a small rock wall before stopping. Gasps filled the set. The director shouted for the medics, but before they arrived, Keanu stepped out slowly, brushing the dust off his jacket, unharmed but shaken. Sandra ran to him, her eyes wide. "You could have been hurt," she said, her voice trembling. He gave a small smile. Sometimes close calls remind you how precious life really is. But later that day, when he went to his trailer, he collapsed silently. The stress, exhaustion, and years of pushing himself finally caught up. The doctor called it dehydration and fatigue, but Sandra knew it was more than that. It was the weight of everything he carried behind that calm face. She sat beside his bed that evening, the set now quiet, everyone worried. Keanu opened his eyes slowly and said, "Don't look so sad." "I'm fine," Sandra shook her head gently. "You keep saying you're fine, but you never rest." "You take care of everyone but yourself," he smiled weakly. "Maybe that's just who I am." She took a deep breath, her voice trembling. But even the kindest hearts need care too. For the first time, Keanu didn't respond with words. He just looked at her with quiet eyes that seemed to hold both gratitude and pain. The next morning, he returned to set despite the doctor's warning. He refused special treatment and worked alongside everyone else, helping move equipment, thanking the crew one by one. That silent strength made everyone emotional. People began to realize this film wasn't just another project. It had become a reflection of real life, a story about resilience and quiet courage. One of the younger crew members later told Sandra, "I've never seen a star like him. He makes you want to be better, just by watching him." That evening, the director gathered the cast for a private screening of the unfinished film. When the emotional rain scene appeared, the same one that had caused all the rumors, no one could hold back tears. Sandra looked at Keanu sitting beside her, his face lit softly by the screen, and felt something shift inside her. This film wasn't about fame or success anymore. It had become a tribute to kindness, to endurance, to the beauty of silent strength. But as the credits rolled on that rough cut, a sudden message came through the director's phone. Something urgent. Something unexpected. A major sponsor had pulled out due to the earlier controversy, putting the entire film's release at risk. Months of work, all their effort, could disappear overnight. The crew looked at each other in panic. The director buried his face in his hands. And then, quietly, Keanu stood up and said, "Don't worry. I'll fix this." No one knew how, but everyone believed him. Because when Keanu said something, he meant it. The night was long and silent after the bad news. Most of the crew stayed behind, pacing around the half-lit set, whispering about what would happen next. The sponsor's withdrawal meant the film might never see release. The studio was panicking, the director was heartbroken, and everyone looked to Keanu for answers. But he didn't speak much. Instead, he sat quietly on the edge of the stage, staring at the empty camera, lost in thought. Sandra walked up to him and said softly, "You don't have to carry this alone." He looked at her and smiled gently. "Maybe not, but sometimes you have to be the first to show it can be done." The next morning, before anyone arrived, Keanu was already at the studio office. He met the executives and the finance team, calm and focused. By the time the crew came in later that day, rumors began to spread again. But this time, it wasn't about scandal. It was about sacrifice. Keanu had offered to personally cover part of the funding loss, not as a star, not for fame, but for the people who had given their heart to the project. He refused to let anyone lose their job because of him. The director was speechless when he heard it. "You don't have to do this," he said. Keanu replied simply, "I do. Because sometimes the right thing isn't about gain. It's about peace." Sandra watched the entire exchange with tears in her eyes. His quiet generosity had once again turned chaos into calm. She realized that real power didn't come from influence or money. It came from choosing kindness when no one expected it. The studio reluctantly accepted his gesture, and within days, the project was back on track. Filming resumed, but something had changed forever. Everyone worked harder, smiled more, and treated each other like family. On the final day of shooting, the director gathered the cast and crew. He said, "I've been in this industry for decades, but I've never seen a team like this. And I've never seen a heart like yours. Keanu." Applause filled the room, but Keanu only smiled shyly and said, "We all made this happen together." When the final scene wrapped, Sandra stood beside him under the same lights where their first eye contact had changed everything. She said quietly, "You know, this film started with a look, and that look created something bigger than both of us." He nodded. "Sometimes one honest moment can change everything," he said softly. "That's all it takes." Months later, the film was released. Critics called it the most human movie of the decade. But what stayed in people's hearts wasn't just the story. It was the kindness behind it. Stories spread online about how Keanu treated the crew, how he stayed late to thank every technician, how he gifted part of his salary to struggling staff. The world didn't just see an actor anymore. They saw a reminder that goodness still existed. During the premiere night, as the lights dimmed and the film played, Sandra looked at Keanu beside her. He seemed at peace, his eyes reflecting the screen's soft glow. She whispered, "You changed the way people see kindness." He smiled. "No," he said quietly. "We just reminded them it was always there." The audience rose for a standing ovation as the final scene faded to black. Keanu and Sandra didn't speak. They just exchanged a small, knowing smile, the same way it had all begun. And somewhere in that moment, surrounded by light, applause, and gratitude, it became clear that their story wasn't just about fame or film. It was about what truly lasts: respect, humility, and the quiet power of a kind heart.